I'm Carole Leathem, and you're listening to the Caretakers Journey podcast. Today, we are going to look at chapters 7 and chapters 8. Chapter 7 is entitled, God's Gift to Us in the Trials. Don't you just love receiving the perfect gift? I know I do. On Valentine's Day this year, I got a text from a friend. I've known her for over 50 years, and she said, I'm praying for you today. The text said, I just want you to know that I sent you a gift and it's going to arrive later today. All day long, I was anticipating what could the gift be? What did she send me? That evening, a bag came from Amazon, and when I tore it open and dumped it out, the contents were hundreds of Post-it notes. Now, if you've been listening to this podcast for very long, you know I love Post-it notes. What an incredibly thoughtful gift. It was butterflies, it was cats. There were so many colors, shapes, and sizes. What an incredible gift. But what if you get a gift that you can't use? Do you hide it in a drawer? Do you return it? Or do you quietly regift it to someone else? Sometimes we discover that our unwanted gift is perfect for someone else, and it might be something that they've wanted for a really long time. James 1:2 says, consider it a sheer gift, my friends. This makes me think of receiving a gift I really want, not one that I want to return or regift. The Message says sheer gift. The translation, the New International Version, says pure joy. This feels like a friend is giving you the best gift ever, like my Post-it notes. One of the hardest lessons that I've had to learn from my messy, chaotic life is that God sees trials and challenges differently than we do. When James is writing those words, he's talking about pure joy, sheer gift. He's talking about trials. What if we could return or regift our trials? I do not know one person that I would wish the trials of the last 10 years on. Not one. A few years ago, I sat back and I looked at the pain and confusion of the trials that I was going through. I didn't think that I would ever find a way to look at them as a sheer gift or with pure joy. I remember being really angry and yelling at God, really? This trial is your gift to me? Can I just give it back? I don't want it. I know this might sound to you like I'm being irreverent, but the beautiful thing about God is He can take our anger and He hears our words, knows our hearts, and is lovingly patient. So, how does God see our trials differently than we do? Well, we see trials and challenges as irritations, problems to solve, things that make irreversible changes in our lives, or situations that can be terrifying. Finding joy in my less messy life has been a long process. It's been a life of trusting God and understanding the incredible adventure life has been with Him. When Bill's anxiety gets out of control, when I'm afraid his depression is going to return, as my mom's health continues to fail, and I'm exhausted from the trials that they're coming at me from all directions, I cry out to God. My first response might be anger and questioning, but then I turn back to the truth that God has been with me every step of the way. I have a story in the book of how God just keeps showing up. It's a little teaser. You're going to have to get the book and read the story. Because even now, God is reminding me every day, I'm here. Because He sees trials differently than I do. This helps me. I can change my focus from the fear of the trial to the adventure of the journey. I really can see that He has a plan. I am imagining right now all the incredible caretakers all over the world who are listening right now. And while none of our journeys are the same, they're all hard and messy. I get it. I really get it. So here's another teaser from chapter 7 of the book. When I choose to move my focus from fear of the problem to the adventure, we have to trust. How many times does God give us the answer, but we're too scared, think it's too silly, or stop trusting that He really is giving us the answer? Guys, this story is pretty amazing. And I hope that you will read it. I hope that you'll grab a copy of my book and read it because it's a pretty funny story. When we get to that point of wanting an answer, we want lightning to strike. We want God to speak in a loud, booming voice. We want clear instructions. And the truth is, the Bible tells us that God spoke to Job through a violent storm. He spoke to Moses through a fire, and he spoke to Elijah in a quiet whisper. Well, in this story in chapter 7, in this age of technology, you're going to find that in this story, God spoke through a cell phone and a YouTube video. We were stuck in the middle of nowhere. And God used a cell phone and a YouTube video. I hope you'll read it. It's a good one. And I'm so glad I was listening that day. So let's talk about a few truths. Trials and challenges have never shown up on anyone's wish list. That's the truth. None of us say, oh, I think I would like a trial or I would like a challenge. But the truth is, God sees trials and challenges as a gift to help us grow. When we're afraid, we need to turn to God. And worship music is a great tool. The scriptures are a great tool. God can remove our fears even if the challenge remains. Remember, we talked about living with fear, not in fear last week. We can feel God's presence through creation. Just step outside for 5 minutes and look around. God speaks through storms, fire, a quiet whisper, and also through Google and YouTube. Don't turn back out of fear. We didn't that day. And because if we did, we would have missed an adventure. So what are the sticky note moments? Well, I have learned from my messy life that God sees trials differently than we do. He sees them as a gift to help us grow. God says to me, I'm right here, and no matter what happens, you will be okay. God also says, I will be here to walk with you, holding you close. I will carry you when it gets hard. You must fight through your fears and trust me. And finally, I have turned my fear of the trial into the anticipation of the adventure of the journey. So what's a to-do list? Well, since God considers tests and challenges a gift that help us grow, look at your mess. How do you see your mess helping you grow? What trials and challenges are you facing that God is telling you to fight through and trust Him with? What perfect gifts has God given to you? Identify a place where you feel especially close to God and His creation. For me, it's the beach. Although I will tell you, it has now become as important for me to be in the Smoky Mountains or on my back porch. How do you choose to move your focus from the fear of the trial to the adventure of the journey? Have you created your own when life gets scary playlist yet? I would say do it today. Chapter 8, Mastering Mental Gymnastics. Oh, guys, when you love and care for someone who struggles with mental illness, everything becomes about them. Their symptoms, their medications, their doctors, their psychiatrists, how they feel, what you should say, what you should not say. They basically become the center of your universe. Life can get exhausting and overwhelming. It can be easy to get lost and stop taking care of yourself, especially if you weren't very good at it to begin with. As soon as you stop taking care of yourself, your own survival is in jeopardy. There is a companion illness that affects those who are caregivers, and it's called caretaker burnout. It's important for us to take our emotional temperature. Are we cutting back on things that we love to do? Are we overreacting? Let me make it personal. Am I isolating? Am I overeating? Am I not sleeping? These are just a few of the symptoms. My husband's mental illness manifests itself in anger and blame towards me. In chapter 8, I know, another teaser, I share a particularly painful story. But there are some things that I still struggle to say out loud. That's why there's not an audiobook. I didn't want another voice reading it, and I can't do it. On this particular day, I found myself asking questions like, what did I do? Should I have done something different? What's wrong with me? I have a pretty sensitive rejection button, and I discovered that morning that I had picked up some shame and guilt that did not belong to me. The guilt told me I wasn't enough for my husband, and I was a failure because I couldn't help him. The shame came from wondering what people were thinking of me, beating myself up because I didn't have enough faith. And I was really scared that people, especially my adult kids, would find out how bad things really were. As I sat in my new bedroom, yep, that's part of the story. You have to go read it. That morning, I felt God say to me, Carole, you can make a mistake and not be a mistake. Stop trying to outrun your hurt. Get off the hamster wheel to nowhere and rest in me. Now, this is a pretty important lesson, and I hope that you'll stay with me for it, because here is an important truth. When I feel guilt, I perceive that I have done something bad. You can call it sin, whatever, but I perceive that I've done something bad. That's guilt. When I feel shame, I perceive that I am bad. That's my identity. Do you notice the difference there? I did something bad versus I am bad. Guilt, shame, or let me be even clearer. I made a mistake versus I am a mistake. That morning, I picked up my coffee and I walked out into my garden. And as I stood there watching the birds in my feeder, I realized that in my current circumstances, I hadn't done anything wrong. So there wasn't a need for guilt. And I hadn't made any mistakes, and there was definitely nothing wrong with me, so there's no need for shame either. When I walked back into the house and my new bedroom, I picked up my journal and I wrote these words across the top of an empty page. Mental gymnastics. When dealing with my husband's mental illness, it becomes a sort of mental gymnastics for both of us. Now, I love watching the Olympic gymnasts compete, their bodies twisting, turning, tumbling, and my mind does this with my words, feelings, and emotions as I'm trying to make sense out of something that makes no sense at all. Like why I was in that circumstance that morning. My mind does mental gymnastics when I'm trying to take responsibility for fixing my husband, when I'm getting angry because he's blaming me. I feel guilt, shame, and rejection. I tell myself I don't deserve this, and I go right back to that hamster wheel to nowhere. That morning, I said to God, out loud into this room, something needs to change. And God said, you are so right, princess. Yeah, he calls me princess too. You are so right, princess. You do. You need to change. Now get off that hamster wheel to nowhere and get to work. As I sat there thinking, Olympic gymnasts train for years before they're competing. My training for the mental gymnastics I'm dealing with even now, 10 years later, is the 4+ decades of marriage that we have spent together and the 5+ decades that I've been in relationship with God. I then went and wrote 3 words under the words mental gymnastics. I wrote training, surviving, and mastering. Yes, these became sticky notes that went into my window. As a gymnast grows and learns, they have to make adjustments, much like I did when mental illness became a part of my daily life with my husband. I had to learn new coping skills, behaviors. I had to continue to live in spite of the difficult circumstances. That's survival. When a gymnast is hurt or wants to quit, they have a coach who steps up with a pep talk, or a trainer who steps up with some way to help them through the hurt. My son and daughter have been instrumental in coaching me through the last 10 years. I also have several very close girlfriends who are still walking through the chaos with me today. As I stop and think of all the people who encourage and coach me, I go back to my scripture and God. He is the foundation of my strength. I know I say this over and over. He has continued to walk through these tough years with me. I don't get on that hamster wheel very often anymore, but I pulled up an old YouTube video of a gymnast competing at the Olympics. As I was watching the judges score her at the end of her routine, I imagined me standing there in front of my family, friends, and God. And they were all holding up cardboard signs that say, Perfect 10. So let's talk about some truths. Caregiver burnout is an illness that can affect those who care for loved ones struggling with health or mental illness. And when you are caring for someone who struggles with mental illness, there is a delicate balance between the pressure, which can help you mature or can potentially destroy you. You, in your own journey, have to find that where that point is, where that line is that you have to draw in the sand. There is more help for those who struggle with mental illness than for those who care for them. That's where the Caretakers Journey community came from. Mental illness is a cycle. It's easy to believe our loved ones is on the upswing. And then, I love this word, we get gobsmacked when we see that it happens again. Guilt and shame are two symptoms of caregiver burnout. We must train to survive and master mental gymnastics. Self-care is critical to mastering mental gymnastics. Training and surviving are a choice. So here's the sticky note moments. Did I take my emotional temperature today? That one's on my computer. This next one is one of my favorite ones, and I'm constantly walking over to the window with my coffee to read it. This is how much God loved Carole. He gave his son, his one and only son, for her. And this is why. So that Carole need not be destroyed, but by believing in Jesus, Carole can have a whole and lasting life. That comes out of the scripture, John 3:16. Here's another post-it note. I am replacing guilt and shame with restoration. The things that need to change is me. Get off my hamster wheel and get to work. And here's the breakdown of training, surviving, and mastering. Training, the activity of learning a new skill or behavior. Surviving, continuing to live in spite of a difficult circumstance. Mastering, to gain control of or overcome. And this last one will make sense if you know me or have read the book, Disneyland, as often as possible. So here's your to-do list. Take your emotional temperature. Are you stuck running on your own personal hamster wheel? Have you ever been gobsmacked because you thought things were over and then you found out that the cycle was just starting all over again? Think about what drives you to jump on that hamster wheel again. Are you carrying around guilt and shame that don't belong to you? I would challenge you to look up John 3:16 and then write it in your journal, inserting your name. What new skill or behavior do you need to learn to survive and master the mental gymnastics in your messy life? How are you using self-care to train for those mental gymnastics? Oh yeah, did you create your When Life Gets Scary playlist yet? Thank you for joining me today. I will be back next week and we will talk more about chapters 9 and 10. And until then, it's all about him.